Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Golden Age Gurus podcast, your source for regenerative, entrepreneurial, and spiritual strategies that make the world a better place. And now, it's an honor to introduce your host, Baba John.
All right, Alistair, welcome. Do you hear me?
No, I hear you all good.
Okay, we're recording.
Good.
All right, everybody, I want to introduce to you a visionary social impact entrepreneur, steward of the new earth, and magical mystic man. Alistair, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We are pretty much low tech right now. I was trying to do this on Riverside. We're in Zoom instead. So we're going to be a little more fancy. Zoom it is.
Zoom it is. I've been downgrading from Riverside as a podcaster myself again, so I think it should do it. Should be fine.
If the shoe fits, we'll wear it. So we're going to talk about social entrepreneurs. I met Alistair in Guatemala maybe like 3-4 years ago.
Rather 4 years ago, yeah.
4 years ago. Alistair is from Germany, and I've been really impressed with his professionalism, with the way that he does business. He's helped me, and it's my pleasure to share him with you. So, Alistair, do you mind giving us a little bit of information about your origin story and basically what inspired you to dedicate your life to social entrepreneurship?
Yeah, sure thing, with pleasure. Well, I think I'm going to introduce myself with a format that I made up, which I call a soul picture. Whether you see me or you listen to me, I'm born 1979. So I'm going to be like 45 years soon, into an activist family. And in Germany, I'm a community-born child. And my father was one of the founding members of the German Green Party. And we're not going to segue into my personal opinion about the Green Party in the coalition right now. But what I wanted to share is that this whole systemic question, I think I got the Kool-Aid through the umbilical cord, because fact being is that my father then built up the first PR agency focused on sustainability in the DACH region. So DACH region means Germany, Austria, Switzerland. And when the Mosaic browser launched in 1995, I was the main guy doing building up with my father and a small team, sustainability database of around about 60,000 sustainability articles. I will also sketch different parts of my life throughout the podcast, but to stay with that trail of social entrepreneurship and impact. So I then studied macroeconomics. I'm pretty much a macro guy, so I didn't study microeconomics. And I then built up the first B2B magazine on sustainability issues, again in Germany, so in the German-speaking countries, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, was the main guy doing the sales there. So built up basically the outbound communication, the newsletter reach, and did a hell lot of cold calling after my studies. And then I did somewhat like 10 years of like strategy consulting, mainly focusing in my own theory of change on family-owned businesses. So when I say a macro guy, I was always driven by the really big questions like, okay, there's a tiny fraction of, for example, sustainable agricultural practices in the European Union, and a 3-figure billion sum each year pumped into mainstream agriculture in Europe alone. So it's the biggest chunk that the European Commission gives away in the European Union, is basically to exacerbate the problems of like mainstream agriculture. And this is obviously just one of the quote unquote verticals, because I mean, if we talk about sustainable agriculture or renewable energies or new ways to recode capital, I think there is a lot that that we can unpack in the podcast. And maybe to finish that, I think a really pivotal moment was when I was 24 and I was studying and honestly lost in the middle of personal development, going to India and sitting with sadhus and gurus, but at the same time wanting to make an impact. I stumbled over the work of a guy whose name is like Ken Wilber. And Wilber is an American philosopher, and I would call myself an integral heretic. So I'm not saying everything that has been published by Ken Wilber and his folks, is the best or only thing on the planet. But what it provides you with is a simple meta framework to structure complexity. And it goes as the following, and with that I can end my intro, is like every situation you can analyze from an interior and an exterior perspective, an individual and a collective perspective. And that simple grid, which in the Aqua framework of Ken Wilber is called the quadrant matrix, you can really apply that to any and every situation in your life. And what I then did with 24 was literally pretty strategically mapping my own map as an entrepreneur and just said, okay, what do I have to do in order to have the maximum of leverage in the systemic space? We can unpack that in the cultural space. And then to point the finger into my direction, what is the amount of personal work, shadow work, meditation, work with plant medicine, and so forth, in order that I can unlock the maximum of prana, chi, life force, whatever, to run through me as this living being that makes this human experience. I think that's enough for a pretty extensive intro, but that it just gives the people a snapshot about me.
Yeah, I mean, that basically, how do you become the best you, the best version of yourself for the most impact? And I'm looking up Ken Wilber, and I see here, I hear a lot about integral theory, and that's basically where you're going, right? Like it's basically you're talking about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can really take myself as an example. So when you just take the interior individual quadrant, which is one out of the four quadrants or out of the meta integral framework, then I can unpack that and say, Alistair, as most people on their own spiritual path, was very successful in spiritually bypassing the deeper personal development that I had to do at a later stage in my life. So how did I start my spiritual journey? Like most people, I did yoga and I did Vipassana and I did Zen Buddhism, and I had all sorts of interesting, wild oneness experiences of being one with life, one with the universe, one with Godhead. But the interesting thing is the shadow, meaning those things stored in my subconscious, meaning my family patterns, my upbringing, my cultural conditioning, me being a human being, being born with a penis, for the lack of a better word, so being a man, the intergenerational trauma, all of that you don't resolve just because you meditate. For that, you have to use other methods, toolkits, frameworks to work on your shadow. This is better done doing psychotherapy, family constellation work, systemic work, neuro-linguistic programming, and so forth. And this is, again, just like the upper left quadrant. And that's why I find it so elegant, not just to say it's integral, but to really say, how can I apply that integral framework to unlock the maximum of power, joy, juiciness, into the life as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it seems to be a sexy way to break things down. I learned what I learned was something called spiral dynamics. Have you heard of it?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
so spiral dynamics is a good example of the lower left quadrant, the cultural quadrant.
Mm.
So, I mean, again, I brought the whole integral framework to Germany and to Europe in parallel to my studies, and was hosting 7 years like circles and personal development, and was hosting all sorts of like conferences with a specific background on the integral framework. So let's stay for spiral dynamics, because I think that's a big nugget that
Mm.
every listener can take away from this podcast already. Already this thing alone is like worth, I don't know, 25,000 US dollars or something.
Yeah.
No, I literally mean it. Spiral dynamics works from the assumption
Mm.
that your individual development as a human being develops in circles around certain values you develop. And I will exemplify that. So as a baby, you're 100%, first of all, dependent on your mother the first year. So the father is pretty secondary, because for you as a newborn child that depends on the milk from the breasts of your mom, pretty much the only thing that you're interested is like drinking the milk and like sleeping and whatever. But pretty much that's it. Then you basically expand your consciousness as a baby in a healthy sense to also expand your consciousness towards, for example, your dad, your siblings. Then you go into kindergarten. And this is the first stage which can be codified from egocentrism into ethnocentrism. And the further you develop alongside that spiral, you can identify with more complex and more abstract social constructs. So maybe you grow older and you start to play soccer. And then you suddenly understand, I don't know, the blue soccer team fights against the red soccer team. So you identify with that soccer team. But it's not to ridicule it. It's a normal, healthy process as a baby to a child to an adolescent. And then at a certain age, maybe you can identify with something even more abstract, which could be your nation or your role in society. And then ultimately, which you would call from egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric, you can identify as an earthling, as a human being making this experience in 2024, and ultimately trying to wrap your head around that the biggest challenges we face as humanity really are pretty macro, like climate change, acidification of the oceans, all the rainforests burning down, and like a hell lot of other stuff. But this doesn't mean ideally you lose your ego and your ethnocentricity. You're transcending and including your sense of being and your values all the way up and all the way down the spiral. So what does this have to do with entrepreneurship? A fucking hell lot. Because if you know the framework, in less than 2 minutes, in any conversation, in any sales call, in any artifact like a deck that you deliver, you better approximate the center of gravity of the values of your opposite, of your ideal customer, or of your target investor, or of a specific co-founder, because these values are kind of coded in a pretty polar way. Usually, people voting for Trump, and again, it's not about talking bad about Trump. I'm neither pro-Trump nor against Trump. You know, it's like he's just a specific representative of a certain code of values, and usually that doesn't mix very well then with another code of values. But if you're expanded enough and can get some literacy around that framework, what you can uncode the other in a pretty simple and straightforward way. I think that's the elegance of spiral dynamics.
Yeah, they're basically using this just to show people the power of it. They're basically going into hot zones like in the Middle East, for example, you know, where you might have like Palestine and Israeli delegate trying to come to some kind of an agreement, and they're just, you know, red and blue, and they're just going to fight unless they have a system to find common ground. And so what this allows you to do is to take people that are, you know, have different sets of values, like you said, and get them into an agreement, so they can stop killing each other, or whatever the goal is. And
I think Israel and Palestine is really, I mean, that's a big shot because there's hundreds of layers of generations of intergenerational trauma packed into that. So I think the example you chose is a powerful one. But let's stay with the basics. So imagine you're an entrepreneur. Imagine somebody asks you to write a deck. Then you better know, okay, is that investor a rather conservative one? What's his political affiliation? Or is he a rather like he's all about equality and impact? Or it's you can map in a granular way. You can use the same deck. You can even type that into ChatGPT-4. You can literally say, okay, give me all Google slides through the language of somebody that would code the deck through Spiral Dynamics Green. And ChatGPT-4 would write you that in a completely different way than if you were to assess the same deck for somebody in Spiral Dynamics Orange. So these stages are color coded. Anyhow, I think you can get Pareto rule applies. So the Pareto rule is with 20% of your effort, you can get 80% of the results. If out of that podcast, with an additional link that we may provide in the show notes, but you can also simply Google it for yourself. You educate yourself for, 2 to 4 hours on Spiral Dynamics. You get quite something out of it that you can apply in your journey as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, we had to sit there for a whole day or two and get, slides from a professor to even start to comprehend it. And you're saying it's just a quadrant of the bigger, integral theory system, but we don't want to drown people in information that won't make any sense. But the bottom line is we're talking about systems that help solve problems that are being used globally. Alistair is an expert and has taken it further than I've just learned about 1/4 of it. But
all I'm saying is what I find very interesting is let's stay with integral for like the integral framework for a short moment. When I did switch from Windows to Mac, again, not saying that Mac is better, right? Or Apple is superior. That's not the story. But I needed to invest some time. I don't remember that much, but I don't know, maybe a week or two to educate myself. How do I get the most out of the new operating system? Yeah. So what I always refer to integral, it's an operating system. So what it helps you as an entrepreneur is literally up level your operating system, because it literally gives you competitive advantage. And all I'm saying is, I mean, if you ultimately educate yourself on Spiral Dynamics or not, I mean, that's your choice. All I'm saying is, since I come from B2B sales and I'm doing that now since 17 years, if you have Spiral Dynamics in the back of your head, in your operating system, it will give you competitive advantage. And that, again, is coined through the orange meme as coded, because I could explain the same thing, at least in like 4 to 6 different ways of expressing my language. But I've color coded it in a way that I think some hungry young social entrepreneurs or impact entrepreneurs hopefully get the most out of it and only invest maybe an hour or two.
Yeah, so like I'm in Dallas right now. Dallas is a very orange city. So it's like how do they what's the key word for orange?
Efficiency, cost savings. So you never get an orange guy as an impact entrepreneur with save the planet, because he doesn't fucking care.
Yeah, they
doesn't care.
Right.
But you can sell an orange guy very well, maybe to replace expensive, I don't know, heating in the winter that's fueled by oil with solar. If you can show him in a fucking one-pager that the solar costs him less.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to worry about his fucking values. You just convince him on the bottom line, the financial balance sheet, that he saves money by installing solar.
Right. So then you eat a mushroom and you go green, right? But you're green, you're a level of consciousness up the spiral above the orange, for-profit consciousness, which is a level above red, which is command and conquer, like the conquistadors, coming to America and killing everybody, taking a life. That's like red consciousness, and we went up to orange, which is Dallas, where I'm at. And you eat a mushroom, go green, and then you're surrounded by orange and red sharks that don't give a shit and will eat you. So you better figure out how to go green with some practicality and language, and you need to you can't just go in there holistic and wanting to save the world. You have to have the ability to deal with sharks, and you have to have the ability to communicate with black and white people that haven't eaten any mushrooms, right? Like, so they would, that's a level above green, which I think is yellow.
Exactly. Yellow is color coded as integral. So,
Yeah, now you don't read all of it, and you can function as a green
different
in a red or orange world.
Exactly. So the way that I usually explain it in a snapshot, once you understand in yourself and have integrated, ideally in your own upbringing and in your own biography, that on the different stages as expressed in your own biography, neither your parents could do different, nor your teachers, nor your mentors, or the stuff that you have lived, but you have a felt experience inside of yourself, that all of this are kind of like Lego blocks, like that Lego from, I think, originally Denmark or something, like these building blocks inside of your psyche, that you can activate something that's very efficiency driven, or how to structure agile work sprints, but you're also able to package that in a way that you deliver to your audience. So ultimately, I think, because that's still a nascent, developmental stage, and I think we're all still learning. So I think as an entrepreneur, my main change, I don't know when that was, maybe some 10 years back, is instead of trashing everything that most likely most of the listeners as well are enjoying of modern life, which is, for example, in front of me, like a Macintosh laptop, all of this can only exist because we had the Industrial Revolution, and it's very efficient resource allocation. What you then can question is the efficacy of the whole system, because trying to change the way how the market at large, the system at large, allocates the resources. I mean, capitalism is pretty smart at it. But to ask the efficacy question, the why question in your own biography, what's your purpose? What gets you up in the morning? What excites you? What's your North Star? What do you want to grow into? What's your big vision in your life? And then to almost backcast that into the now and say, okay, what's actually the delta in between the Alistair that's 45 and maybe the Alistair that's 55? And then say, there's some interesting growth edge into it, and to turn the challenges into ways to grow. I think I've always been fascinated by the big figures. I can definitely incentivize anybody to get a coach or a mentor or a shaman or a priest or a Zen master or whatever, because ultimately those to whom you look up to, it's not to idolize them or to put them on a pedestal, but to ask yourself, okay, that monk, which maybe, I don't know, be surrounded by love and peace and equanimity. When I was in my early 20s and started my way into meditation, which is now obviously a quarter of a century back, but then I was really just, I'd love to have some equanimity, because I'm a very emotional being, and I was haunted by my emotions, especially when I was younger. But the same with a mentor, you know? So I was searching for a financial mentor, and I met her in 2007. And I mean, that's a woman who went from a Romanian immigrant, poor as fuck, to be the first woman to study informatics at Harvard, one of the first 20 to enter Oracle, that exited her Oracle shares and now built like a 3-figure million single family office and really does amazing shit and is full member club of Rome. And when I met her back in the day when I was 28, and all the things she told me I could grow into, I could honestly not even comprehend that. And all she said is like, sweetheart, plan for your 50s. And I'm like, what? I'm planning for my 30s. And she said, no, plan for your 50s, you know? And then you can set up a huge growth trajectory, because then suddenly you can say, okay, if I want to be there with 50, where do I want to be when I'm 40? Where do I want to be when I'm 30? And what are then the first steps on the path to grow into that? And I don't think that's ending, unless, I mean, maybe with 85 or so. But I think if you're healthy and if God, the universe, conspires with you and you don't get Parkinson or Alzheimer or whatever, I know that my father is, for example, in his early 70s, and he's like full on juicy, yummy, working, doing, traveling, and not like an old age random dude, you know, he's like full of life force.
That's good. Yeah. My parents are having a hard time. They both got the jab. Don't they?
That's just that rabbit hole. I don't think we would go into jab country, a rabbit hole.
Have a good idea.
I think we can move into this like building blocks of impact.
Okay.
I think that could be really, really inspiring for the listeners. So I had all in all 4 mentors in my life. And for whatever odd reason, they all have been women, insanely powerful and super influential, like big figures in the public space. And I think with what I want to start is a thing that's still with me. I don't know when I heard it, from which mentor exactly. Don't know. Now I remember. She's a top executive coach and trains like Olympic teams in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And a stage trainer for whatever, politicians and stuff like that. And when I met her, the first thing, like the first intervention that she did for me, was insanely difficult and very painful, because we found out in the mentoring process that in my first career, I was a ballet dancer. So it was from 7 till 20, I was a ballet dancer on the state opera, yada yada. You can look it up on my website. And then that dream collapsed, followed by a long dark night of the soul, and me not knowing at all what my purpose was, because all I wanted was to be a professional ballet dancer. I was always the best in class ballet dancer, with all the beautiful things surrounded by like creativity, earning my own livelihood at a very early stage, not the least all the beautiful women I was surrounded with. I'm rather heterosexual. So the first intervention from my mentor is that she asked me to take a stage training, but I didn't do it because there was a part in my psyche that was always on stage, but then I was not on stage.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, I think I knew her already for 3, 4, 5 years, and she always offered me, but she asked me to pay the full price. So she didn't give me like a fucking penny of a discount. I needed to pay a very fucking premium price for a stage training. But that stage training was very pivotal to understand sometimes you need to face your shadow, you know, because the stream collapsed. I didn't want to be on stage. I'm still hardly ever on stage, but going again through that trauma, if you want to coin it, I think it may be a big word, but through that painful emotion to being again on stage, like really deeply liberated me. And then the next nugget she shared, because I said, I don't know exactly what I want to do. And she said, well, maybe that's not so important for you. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to change the world and I want to have impact and all these big projects. And I really feel I'm called to serving the planet. And she said, well, maybe you start with joy. And there was a deep truth in it. And then I asked her, yeah, but what makes me joyful? And she's like, well, I think you know it. So anyhow, we went in the coaching process and I found out I really love communicating with other human beings.
Mm.
I'm really good at it, you know? So I basically moved over a period of years from just B2B sales of being kind of the truffle pick for my portfolio project to scout for the right values aligned investors,
Mm.
co-founders, scouting the team, niching the brand. But who does all these calls in a week? On average, I would say maybe 30 a week or so. Who is the guy in all these conferences trying to filter, okay, there's 100 family offices. I did my due diligence. I think only like 10 maybe are interesting. Well, how do you get there if you don't know them? You know, do you have the balls to really approach a person that may be very famous? I can do that. And again, I'm not saying this because I'm better than anybody else, but ultimately it's like, what really lights you up? And I'm a guy, we're now planning New York like Climate Week. So we'll be there with 3 portfolio projects. And it's all about like big figure sums raising money for these portfolio projects. And I know myself as Alistair, I feel like a fish in the water. I also then need a quiet time and meditation and stuff like that. But I know that a full week of doing like hundreds of pitches and being in the middle of the room with all these people, for me, it really comes with joy and grace and ease. And also, if I'm exhausted after a working day, usually being in this many rooms with many people together comes super simple. So that would be just, you know, the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon, but it's really a deep questioning with what fills you up. I'm, for example, really bad in construction work. And like, it's super bad. I come from a gardener's family. My grandfather was good at construction. My dad was good. And my brother was good. I mean, give me a hammer and a nail. I mean, that's pretty much my proficiency. I mean, I can take a hammer and hammer it into a wall if I'm lucky, you know, but that's pretty much it. So all I'm saying is my brother is a wood artist, right? Like he works with wood and sells that. And he loves that. He's always been with wood and, you know, craftsmanship. So the main takeaway from this is like, what does light you up? Like at the innermost core of who you are, and follow that joy and that expression, because I truly feel life like a life force, like Satchidananda from the Vedas, you know, it's like, you know, the being, the awareness of the being, and the joyfulness awareness of being should express itself as life force through you as a joyful experience. You know, even it's not that I love all these Zoom conferences. Sure, I sometimes would love to be more physically with people, and I'm also not exhausted my own learning curve or growth curve, nor do I think I will ever be. But generally, even if I spend a lot of time in front of the screen, having all these conversations with funky people, I really love that book. I really honestly, as a dear listener, or if you see the video, I would really follow the path of your own joy, what lights you up.
So that's part of the toolbox, is just finding that center. And then what else do you have in there in that toolbox? How do you help your clients structure themselves with this chaos?
It's so funny because we wanted to go into the building blocks of impact, but it's okay to go into the toolbox before I was segueing anyhow myself. So let's stay with the toolbox. Again, I would say a rough map helps. So as a human being, you're comprised of a physical vessel within which you make this experience of being human. Sounds dumb and odd and stupid, but it's like the nutrition, your sleep cycle. Do you exercise regularly? Do you train your flexibility, your strength? Do you have enough water in your system? If you take toxins, like toxic substances, like I did, like in my earlier days, so I was a heavy drinker, but I'm straight edge since many years, is like, do you do something to detoxify your body, right? Or also all the, like, whatever, like, I mean, all these environmental toxins out there, I would say that's the realm of the body. I would say then in the mind, there's a million books, just pick one maybe every month. It's just like, what methodologies do you use? Like read management books, structure the complexity, or how do you structure a work week? Are you aware? Like, what's your natural cycle? So, for example, as people notice now, listening or watching the podcast, is like, I'm a person that can rev very high. So my metaphor for Alistair is always, I'm a Ducati. So a Ducati is one of these like motorbikes, right, from Italy. And Ducati can rev incredibly high and like bypass everyone left and right, but it's also pretty fucking fragile. So you need to put it into, the right shop with the right cleaning and the right ingredients for that motorbike as a metaphor. So what I mean with that, I can be super high paced for a week or sometimes a month or 3 months, but then as an entrepreneur, I truly take time off. I take a prolonged weekend, I take a week off, hardly ever take more than maybe 10 days off as an entrepreneur, usually in the last years, meaning like fully offline. But when I recognize that I've been revving in the red for a prolonged period of time and some like early signals go on. So for me, that would be waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning and having Excel sheets and lead lists, in front of my inner brain. Then it's a clear signal that I need to slow down. I would say that's maybe the mental and the physical part. I would say in the spiritual part, maybe let's reframe a little bit. What does spirituality mean? For me, spirituality means a lot of different things. I think I have always been on the quest of, let's call it, unity consciousness. And I had so many unity consciousness experiences that it's just beautiful. It's like collections of the pearls of divine light or something like that. But usually, for most people at least, unless you're fully realized Buddhist monk sitting in a cave or something like that, we all make this experience in 3D reality. So my recommendation as a consciousness explorer would be explore consciousness without using substances. So my personal biography was I was meditating 15 years before using substances, but that may be the other way around. Or come to that conclusion like in a couple of minutes, is train your consciousness. Grab up a meditative practice, stick with the one that like lights you up, that's juicy, that's sexy, that gives you power and energy and wisdom, and stay with that for a while. Much like heavy weightlifting, which I also do, is like, but stay with the practice for a prolonged period of time, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and then complement the practice. So I'm now coming to my psychedelic part. As Baba well knows, when I was 32, I did ayahuasca. I way overdid ayahuasca, so I did way too many ceremonies in a short amount of time, like around about 40. Then didn't do ceremonial work for maybe 3 years. And then I did a whole shamanic training with all master teacher plants like ayahuasca and iboga and peyote and wachuma, which are both mescaline compounds, and mushrooms. I did a hell lot of LSD. Ketamine I never did. But what I mean with that is my usual recommendation is if you're a psychonaut, meaning you love substances, I love substances, right? Then you should be aware I'm one of these substant dudes or dudettes. So I strongly recommend if you fall into that pocket, take on a daily meditative practice. But I also know the other way around, and I could sketch some people in my closest surroundings, including my own family, where people have meditated for 20, 30, 40 years and never did LSD or ayahuasca or mescaline. And then suddenly they do an intervention, meaning they take a substance and reap incredible benefits. So for the sake of a nugget to take away, if you fall into the bucket of I love substances, but I don't have a regular meditative practice, please take on a regular meditative practice. If you're one of those listening into the podcast and you've done, 20 years of Vipassana and you still have not seen God or the universe or the meaning of it all, Maybe it's time for a high dose LSD or iboga or ayahuasca or a hero dose of mushrooms. So they usually complement each other beautifully. And my sense is when you train the muscle of altering your own state of consciousness without substance, then you also get more out of a ceremonial context. That would be my like broad, rough summary.
Totally. So when you map out all this, like you're thinking of the different physical, emotional, mental systems that are needed to optimize the entrepreneur so that the entrepreneur can level up. You can't just level up your business without leveling up other things, right? Like, so you get them opening the channels up so that there can this fire go up.
I would say always explore your growth edge and try not to fall into overwhelm. So I think especially when I was younger, I was putting, metaphorically speaking, too much weight on the bench press or doing too much ayahuasca at the same time, or asking me to grow too much as an entrepreneur in 1 year. So I think what helps is being playful with the timelines. And just give an odd example. So, okay, you want to be a millionaire. Let's just take this as a very common example. So any human being, literally any human being, I believe, with the right circumstances, so maybe not in Darfur, Sudan right now. That may be a bit tricky, right? But for those of you listening that want to become a millionaire, I would say, I don't think that's really an issue. But I think you need to be flexible with your timeline. So if you say, I want to be a millionaire in 1 minute, a little bit difficult. If you say in 1 hour, maybe again difficult. If you say in a month, still difficult. If you say in a year, I'm like, okay. If you have a monster rollout in your backpack and you're heading the sales team and you're getting a sales commission, I think you can go from 0 to being a millionaire in 1 year. That may be like a lucky outlier. But if you say, I want to be a millionaire in like 5 to 10 years, I think you can really pretty strategically plan that. Again, it's never been in my own psychic awareness to attract like copious amounts of money, albeit me now being in a situation where I may be a millionaire, sooner than I ever thought about it. But that's really separate. Be playful with the timelines. Or another example, I don't know what could be another example. Maybe you want to be a shaman. That's actually that's a good example because it's a funky podcast, and we both have an experience of Tulum and and Lake Atitlan. I'm like, okay, I honor that wish, but I only honor it if you give it at least a full 10-year timeline. So I'm now 14 years into shamanism, and I have under my belt, I just recorded an episode about ayahuasca, which will be episode, I think, 49 or so on my podcast, and I've waited 49 episodes to find the right people. And both work for decades, for a sum total of 35 years with ayahuasca, and both still don't coin themselves a shaman. And that's a level of scrutiny that me as Alistair, I really honor, because I think you should honor the asymmetry of accumulated wisdom. So I rather facilitate a shamanic space, and I do my best to invite a proper shaman that's like in his 50s or 60s or 70s or 80s or 90s, and who has been in an uninterrupted lineage, who has like intergenerational wisdom in his blood and flesh and bones, and coining myself a shaman. So I see too many wannabe shamans out there that host retreats, and I don't want to support it. I feel now like I've been asking by 2 indigenous tribes, like by the Shipibo and the Wirarika, if I want to go into apprenticeship. So after 14 years of working with those people, they're basically saying, okay, Alistair, we've seen him in these circles now for repeated years. He seems to be serious about that matter. And then you get invited by the indigenous to really go deeper into apprenticeship. And then I don't know, maybe when I'm 60 or when I'm 70, or I don't know when, but definitely not when I think I'm ready, but when the fucking master shaman, head shaman tells me I'm ready. And that's I think that's also a nugget of wisdom, and also about our relationship that I so much cherish, to not commodify every fucking thing. And just because you can sell ceremonies easy doesn't mean life.
I think maybe you need to have a talk with San Marcos.
San Marcos is a small town at Lake Atitlan where all sorts of wannabe shamans host ceremonies.
Well, I wouldn't call them wannabes. I'd call them youth. They're just like people in their 20s that are figuring out how to make money with ceremony, and they want to be elders. It's a culture of 20-year-olds wanting to be much older than they are, period. And it's interesting. But they're probably next level souls at the same time. I mean, these people are probably reincarnated masters, so they're like, in a 20-year-old body, like, I'm a master. You're like, no, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think if we can preserve the nugget of humility and wisdom of what we just shared, I would just share outliers, statistically speaking, always count. In all lineages, there is sometimes, like take all Zen masters, and then sometimes you have a mid-30s, whatever, like shaman or Zen master. But usually that comes at a later stage in life, more like in your 50s, 60s, or 70s, or 80s. I think it's a good moment to segue into these building blocks of impact.
Mm-hmm.
And before I share it, I think it's really of importance that I share it with humility, because I think the way that I built my portfolio so when you look under my portfolio on my website, like alistairlanger.de/portfolio, you will find some pretty high leverage impact projects. But first of all, that's 17 years of effort to build my own niche and my own positioning. Secondly, it's in a very specific niche, which I call catalyzing radical systemic change. And with radical, I mean to go to the root causes of the system. I just want to quickly map them, because I think it may be exemplary for other people that want to build a portfolio. So instead of just one project, building a portfolio of projects. And I think, again, what helped me tremendously was looking through that integral lens and asking me, okay, when I look at the systems out there at large, there are a couple of things that I learned in university as a macroeconomist, where I was specializing on alternative and complementary currency systems. So I chose to go with Holochain and Coventina Foundation, which is the foundation holding the collateral of Holochain, which has a current market value of $350 million US. So that has a pretty possible substantial lever. Why Holochain, which is not a blockchain, but which aims to remediate most problems that the current blockchain IT architecture has, which is to unlock a multiplicity of real asset-backed currencies. So not fiat currencies, because with a $100 bill, you can't go to the Federal Reserve and redeem it for gold, because it's a fiat currency. It's not backed by anything. It was quite literally backed by the barrel of oil, because the barrel of oil needed to be traded since after Bretton Woods collapsed in 1972 in dollars. At the latest since June 13, when Saudi Arabia didn't renew the contract to trade oil in dollars, I wouldn't put a bet, like a long bet, on the US dollars. So what we're aiming to build with Coventina Foundation and the whole Holochain, Holo hosting network is fully decentralized server infrastructure, and to issue and to provide open source frameworks for people to build their own currency systems. And that's, for example, a lever. In the lower left quadrant, I chose prosocial. I didn't even know before, because English is not my mother tongue. It's German, obviously, as you can take from the odd German accent. is like I chose pro-social because it's a framework within the cultural quadrant to facilitate cultural change, and is based on two empirical components. One is the work of Elinor Ostrom on how to govern the commons, and the other one is behavioral act and change theory, which is also proven to work for hundreds of millions of individuals. So that's my bets in the, like, I would say, systemic change piece and the cultural change piece. And then what I also recommend, if you structure a portfolio, every good impact investor would do that, is that you try to at least approximate spillover effects in between those different portfolio pieces. So, for example, it kind of makes sense that Holochain and Coventina Foundation work with dark matter capital systems, which is another one of my portfolio projects, where we're recoding new asset classes for institutional investors to unlock the quantum of capital that's really needed infrastructure size to unlock money into the regenerative ecosystem, you know? So all I want to say is, when you, as an investor, structure a portfolio, you want to make sure that they mutually create synergies, that they're not like somewhere out there, like completely disconnected or disentangled. You want to like consciously entangle your portfolio pieces.
I use Adobe Behance to manage my portfolio, which I haven't updated in a couple of years. What do you use to manage that?
I think my portfolio strategy is a very odd one. So my business model is advisory for equity. So my long-term bet into the future is that the companies I'm developing, I'm all holding, not all, because some of them are non-profit, but that I hold a small, ideally non-dilutable equity chunk into it. And then my rationale is, okay, I don't know, when I want to go a little bit more chill, maybe when I'm 70, so that's 25 years to go. And maybe I get 10 companies off the ground. And if one company gets traction, then my old age is served.
Yeah.
If one or more of them go through the roof, like Coventina Foundation or Holochain, which is not very unlikely, then I'm kind of, I would say, in a different playing field, which honestly I've internally on a soul level never prepared for. More my mentors always told me, we think this is possible. But I come from a very normal lower middle class background. My mom's a primary school teacher. My dad is a journalist. I don't have any entrepreneur in my whole bloodline, like neither female nor male, like masculine or feminine side of my ancestors. So I kind of all needed to learn it like on my own. And it's still a delicate process to weigh my entrepreneurial risk and make money, because I don't have like passive, or not a lot of passive income. So my current business model is really just advisory for equity. I have a retainer, I do coaching, and that money that I have, I then invest into my portfolio companies.
Yeah, so you could pretty much, sounds like you can manage your portfolio with a crypto wallet. Does Holochain?
I have a crypto wallet. I would have to look it up what it's called. It's one of these decentralized smaller ones. So it's not one of the centralized big ones. Somebody installed it to me and put a couple of Bitcoins back in a couple of Solana and Ethereum instead of. Yeah, it was more an exercise for me to have a wallet, and sometimes I use it. But it's more actually my wallet primarily is in existence because some clients prefer to sometimes pay me in some tokens, and then I do a research. Is it just a Dumbo meme token because I don't do day trading, or does it qualify as a long-term hold? So it's mainly I have Solana, Ethereum, and Bitcoin, maybe some scattered small other stuff, but not that much.
Yeah, I love Holochain. I mean, that's a pretty exciting project that I hear a lot about. I haven't played with it. Have they launched the Holochain? I mean, is it live now? Or still developing it?
it's still developing. We're like in a pretty thorough like beta testing. We aim to get into the swapping period in between hot, which is the token of like hollow fuel, which fuels the server capacity into hollow chain. I reckon by September this year. Maybe even if it gets delayed, but we're really short before the ecosystem like exploding. I see a couple of bullets still on my in my shared screen, navigating challenges, and share a couple of wicked challenges that I encountered and how I overcame them. I would say, let's pick a juicy one.
Yeah, so what are some challenges you've encountered and how did you overcome them? Some unconventional solutions here, Alistair, apparently. You're on
Well, I think truth be told, I think I want to start with, for me, definitely as Alistair, as my personal most painful one, and that was addiction. So I was addicted to alcohol and to marijuana. So I started drinking when I was 13. Highly functional drinker, like best in class, hot chicks, dating, earning money, but really abusing alcohol. And the second one was just like smoking marijuana like Snoop Doggy Dogg from the age of 15. For whatever reason, which I can share some of my meaning making before I finish that one, is it really took me, I think, too long. But I mean, a soul always needs the time it needs. So I always had phases basically of sobriety, and then a more, meaning sobriety was for me always an equivalent to going to monasteries, spiritual masters, up-leveling my entrepreneurship, and a very hedonistic lifestyle that for me was coupled with Berlin, nightclubs, women, and stuff like that. I think even though none of my mentors recommended me that, there came a moment a couple of times in my life where I had the feeling, fuck, am I one of those who needs to go straight edge, meaning like no drinking at all, like no pot at all anymore? And then 9 years ago, when two close friends cheated on me in business, and I was left to either needing to file private bankruptcy or needing to take on a hefty sum of a loan, which I then needed to pay back for 7 years. So I finished to pay that back when I was 42. And this was a decision to go like straight edge, not for the first time, but I basically said, okay, this is like, I basically quit smoking pot, a package of cigarettes a day, and drinking every day, like in the same day, for my first peyote ceremony on November 2nd, 2015. And I then had one relapse that was coupled with a separation from a long-term partner. But then again, you know, my only solution was like, okay, it seems maybe physically, maybe mentally, maybe on a soul level, I'm not coded for the middle way of drinking a bit or smoking a bit of weed. For me, basically, the easiest one was to go straight edge. And from that moment on, actually a lot of the internal conflicts, also a lot of the conflicts with women and in relationships really fell away. Maybe not in a day, because usually as a trained addict, and if you do that like I did it for decades, then you need a moment, a couple of years to learn new behaviors, new patterns. I, for example, remember that it took me years, like multiple years, to enjoy a proper party without taking drugs. So to really go dancing or even in a club, but being sober and to enjoy it. So this was really painful. And maybe a last one for that thing, which I think may be very specific to Alistair, but I'm kind of the nice guy. So my dad is a nice guy, like warm-hearted. I trust people. People trust me. If I give somebody a handshake, for me, that means we're in it. And I needed to learn as an entrepreneur the very hard way multiple times that what people say or what you think they say and having just a handshake agreement in a specific business context better means written words. So if somebody wants something these days from me, I usually, after a call or two, say, oh, you said you want something from me. Here's a fathom summary. I can write you a written proposal and give it a price tag, or you do the other way around, but I'm not engaging in a third and fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh and eighth and ninth and 10th conversation unless we have the deal clear.
Yeah.
And this was a really time and again, because it still happens sometimes, because it's just in the nature of Alistair of wanting to help the planet in beautiful projects, that I need to be very strict on my boundaries and protect myself to not just give, but also to receive. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm still wanted to get clear on how you got over this addiction phase of your life. Like what was what?
So what I did, is straight out of the peyote ceremony, a very harsh Berlin winter, I decided to focus 3 full months only on sobering up. And I was very lucky. Unfortunately, in COVID, they got bankrupt. It was the biggest Osho studio. And there's a specific meditation from Osho, which is called dynamic meditation. And they had a dynamic meditation challenge. And I think they did it for 2 or 3 weeks, and I did 3 cycles. So I was getting up every morning, I think at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, because they started at 6 or 6:30. And I did like this full round of dynamic meditation, which basically means you first, you're moving your body a little bit, then you're dancing, then you're running around, and then you're really I got all my emotions out. So I come from a family that did hide and still hides like heavy emotions. So it's a very smiley, cuddly, feely family. But I never had access to healthy anger. So I got heavily bullied as a child, ballet dancer, best in class. So I got really severely bullied as a child, but never defended myself as a child. And this was an ingrained pattern into adulthood, which I was really working through in this dynamic meditation. So really screaming, using swear words, using like a plastic sword and screaming at your mom and your dad and on my friends that cheated on me, and the big loan I needed to take on. And also in my following somatic, it's called somatic experiencing. It's a specific psychotherapeutical body therapy thing. And we were primarily working on me having a healthy access to anger as a primary emotion, not as a secondary emotion like depression, because I was, as a child and adolescent, I had long depressed periods. But the primary emotion is just anger. When somebody treats you like shit, it's better to feel that somebody treats you like shit and smack the motherfucker in the face than like just say, I'm so sorry and don't hurt other human beings. I'm really, okay, they're bullying me, as a child, And I was really just basically covering up this like primary anger emotion. And to get really access to that was like deeply liberating, and also ultimately connected me to my masculinity.
Nice.
In a healthy sense.
So Osho helped you out there. Sounds like
the dynamic meditation was a very, very deep breakthrough. I think following the work with ayahuasca, which in all indigenous traditions they call the Great Mother. So it's a clearly feminine plant spirit. Worked with peyote and huachuma, which they call the father, and which is not so much like a primarily visionary experience, like you see all the colors and you visit different star systems and interdimensional beings and the other realms in the bardos, all of that is pretty much ayahuasca. But the father unlocks, ideally, a very clear directional energy in your solar plexus, which gives you very precise guidance how to protect yourself. What do you leave behind? What relationships to close? What business endeavors to pursue? Whom to trust or not? So I always compare the power of peyote or huachuma because I find them pretty similar. Some others may say it's not the fact, but I did both extensively. I think they're pretty similar. And they're like a Zen bow, this art of a Zen bow. So you have a direction where you want to head in like 5 years' time, and then ding, and the arrow goes. And then you hit bullseye, and you're like, fuck, I did it. It took me fucking 5 or 7 or 10 years, but I'm there now.
Yeah. Basically, the goal is to help entrepreneurs. You're going for bigger companies these days. You're not going for the mom and pop.
Mom and pop. I mean, it's still all family-owned businesses. I'm intentionally, but it's just my choice from my own theory of change. I personally don't work with publicly listed companies just because I think that from a macroeconomic point of view, how will you even just aim to better the workings of a publicly owned company if the whole system of being listed on the stock market, per definition, is organized to maximize shareholder value? But there's no flaw. I know a lot of my close friends who do like cultural development and stuff like that, or supply chain innovation for like Fortune 500 companies. I just personally decided that I don't want to do that. There's also 10, 15 different hierarchies. I prefer to work with companies on a founder's level or with the anchor investors where people can really take decisions and I just go for it.
Yeah, it's easier to implement. Basically, a triple bottom line, right? That's what we're talking about. People, planet, profit, social. So not just you're basically saying, a company that's already public can implement a triple bottom line as easy as someone that or an entity that's not there.
I'm answering the question slightly different because, and this podcast was mainly like an inspiration, to get the juiciness out of my own system to other human beings to really, aim for a moonshot. Is, I think, depending on how much stamina you have and how long you think you're willing to commit to your purpose, what I learned from all the big entrepreneurs out there, like, it doesn't really matter, all the big figures, is if you really want it, unless you die, okay, sure, you can have an accident or a weird disease. If you really strive for it, ultimately it will manifest. Maybe with a different color, a different facet, a different name, a different team. Maybe you won't become a millionaire, but you become successful in a different skill set, or you find out you were a millionaire and now you turn like a guru. But what I mean with that, perseverance, if you really want to become a master in something in this life, it's not a thing that you attain in a year. Am I a master in meditation? I really don't think so. I meditate since more than 25 years. Really? Almost every day. Yeah. Not when I'm on the dance floor, not when I'm in an ayahuasca ceremony, kind of a different type of meditation, but usually I meditate every year. And I really think in this podcast especially, I think I want to seed a dream, a vision of yourself that is so juicy and sexy and bold and daring that you need 10 years to get there. And you ideally take the appropriate measures to backcast what are the first steps that you need. And if it's sobering up, sober the fuck up. If you never had management literature and you really want to become a successful entrepreneur, well, then maybe don't meditate that much, read more management literature. It's like one guy that I follow, although I don't underline everything he says, like Hormozi, one of these guys that is followed by like millions of people on all channels. And he says the main difference in between a successful entrepreneur and a not successful entrepreneur is doing it.
Yeah.
Doing it, because what you think you do and all the ideas you have in your brain is just
Mm.
do it. However,
Somebody said the value's in the planning process, not necessarily the plan. The plan can change, but just planning, the planning process is in itself valuable. So I can vouch for Alistair's course I took maybe two years ago, right before law school, and you were calling it the challenge or something.
I still call it the challenge, the
We'll call it the
77
challenge.
days next level business challenge.
Yeah, okay, so 77, and you're gonna run another one in a month.
Starting October, the cohort.
Okay, so we got a new cohort that Alistair is going to be running in October, and I've personally been through it, made a lot of friends. He's got a great, fantastic network. He's got great tools. He uses some tools that are pretty standard for accelerator, incubator type containers. So yeah, you're going to give anybody that listens to this a discount, right? Get a little coupon.
Sure, we can do that. I mean, you gotta throw that in the show notes because we didn't talk about the discount. But if you feel like we're giving a discount, it says here, oh, we can announce a 10% coupon for listeners.
Hey,
Sure. You just need to come up with a coupon code. Something funky like Baba John or Golden Age Gurus.
coupon code BABA, BABA.
Okay, coupon code Baba sounds good to me. So everybody that signs up for the challenge and writes me an email or drops me a WhatsApp or in the Calendly link says I come by the podcast, this is the coupon code Baba, you will get a 10% coupon.
Yeah, so what kind of links should we put in here? I got Zoom now has an AI, everyone, an AI companion.
I would do that in the post-production. I don't think we have to worry. I think what golden nuggets for gurus, like offer advice for aspiring impact entrepreneurs listening to the podcast. It also ties into the challenge. In the challenge, like Bava shared, we will work with pretty standard tools like, business model canvas, the golden circle or the horizon 1, 2, 3 model. That's all well proven like frameworks. I came up with an own one that I really think is pretty genius, but that is kind of open source, and that I also got from another person in a program on linguistic programming. It's like, what is really your legacy? If you really aim at a legacy, whatever that means, legacy could be, I want to help people in elderly care having a more human experience in their last years. Could be a legacy, and it doesn't really matter. But if you have that and you really aim to make this part of your purpose, then again, I would set the bar pretty high to achieve that, and then they again backcast. What does that mean in the first year, in the second year, in the third year, in the fourth year? And if you do then a 7-year plan, it's just because I love the number 7, and it's like related to a lot of cycles, also your own physical cycles, but you can also do an 8-year plan if you vibe more with the number 8, or a 9-year plan, or a 10-year plan. But as Bill Gates says, and I put the same asterisk as in my YouTube channel, I'm not a fan of Bill Gates, also not of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but there's a deep grain of truth when he said most people overestimate what they can do in a year and they underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. Right. And this is really the main lesson from the 77 days challenge is usually people cram too much in 1 year, but aspire to little in 5 to 10 years, and to readjust that and to really give the people, the juicy, sexy, bold version of yourself in 5 to 10 years or 7 years. It really makes a hell of a sense. Yeah. Okay, so what, can you give me 3 of your top 3 influencing writers or mentors? Like, who are the top 3 that you think people are game changers if they one of which we pretty extensively discussed. But I really think upping your operating system to integral. This doesn't mean you need to read Ken Wilber in original. There are a lot of free video courses offered by many different people, but just up your operating system to integral.
Mm.
This will just give you crazy competitive advantage. Secondly, definitely Seth Godin. I mean, the amount of free templates, tools, nuggets of wisdom that Seth Godin throws out there is really astounding. And maybe thirdly, because that has really been so influential, is a tiny book which is called The Orange Book from Osho. So for the people who don't know, Bhagwan Sri Ramesh was a guru in the 70s. He died, and then he renamed himself to Osho. So if you Google Osho, the Orange Book, it's a small book with a description of more than, I think, 80 different meditation techniques. Because a lot of people that are new to meditation, they always think meditation means to sit on a cushion. But you can meditate while you're swimming, while you're cooking, while you're making love. And to read that through the lens and then give you very practical applications, that was really a game changer in my own spiritual journey. So, I mean, there's way more, but Seth Godin, Ken Wilber, and Osho.
Hey, that's awesome. That's an awesome 3 suggestion for everybody. So I hope you guys got some value out of this. I know I did. So is there anything else we forgot, Alistair?
I think that feels round and complete and juicy and rich and funky as we wanted to record it.
Okay.